Your Honor, my client built an empire while his wife sat at home, painting her nails and spending his money. To suggest she deserves half of Mitchell Dynamics is not just greedy, it is delusional. The lawyer's voice echoed off the mahogany walls of the Chicago family court, dripping with disdain. At the defendant's table, Aaron Mitchell smirked, checking his Rolex as if the end of his marriage was merely a boring business meeting he was winning. He thought he had erased her. He thought 30 years of silence meant 30 years of weakness. But Aaron forgot one critical detail about the billion-dollar blueprints that made him famous. He never checked the metadata, and he certainly never noticed the tiny, invisible ink sequence, VM 1996, embedded in the bottom corner of every single file. The air in courtroom 4B was stale, smelling faintly of floor wax and old anguish. Judge Lawrence P. Halloway sat behind the bench, his face a roadmap of deep wrinkles and indifference. He had seen thousands of divorces. He had seen screaming matches, tears, and custody battles over hamsters. But the case of Mitchell vs. Mitchell was shaping up to be the spectacle of the year. Aaron Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Dynamics, sat on the plaintiff's side. He looked every inch the titan of industry he claimed to be. His suit was a custom charcoal wool from Savile Row, his silver hair was coiffed to perfection, and his posture exuded the relaxed confidence of a man who had already bought the outcome he wanted. Beside him sat Garrick Sloan, a lawyer known in Chicago legal circles as the Rottweiler. Sloan didn't just win cases, he eviscerated the opposition until there was nothing left but bone. On the other side sat Violette Mitchell. Violette was 52, though she looked older today. She wore a simple navy blazer that had seen better days and a white blouse buttoned to her chin. Her hands, resting on the table, were devoid of jewelry. The 10-carat diamond ring Aaron had given her for their 25th anniversary, a ring bought more for his image than her affection, sat in a velvet box in the center of the table, rejected. "Mr. Sloan," Judge Halloway rumbled, adjusting his spectacles, "you may continue your opening statement regarding the division of assets." Sloan stood up, buttoning his jacket with a theatrical flourish. He turned to face the gallery, which was packed with reporters. Aaron was a public figure, a darling of the tech logistics world. The narrative in the press had already been set. The genius innovator, shedding the dead weight of a gold-digging housewife. "Thank you, Your Honor," Sloan began, his voice smooth as oil. "We are here today to discuss fairness. Fairness is a simple concept. You get what you earn. Mr. Mitchell founded Mitchell Dynamics in a garage in 1994. He worked 18-hour days. He missed holidays. He sacrificed his health to build a logistics software that runs 40% of the global shipping industry." Sloan walked over to Violette's table and leaned in, invading her space. "And what was Mrs. Mitchell doing during this time?" Sloan asked rhetorically, turning back to the judge. "Was she coding? No. Was she negotiating contracts with suppliers in Shenzhen? No. According to the tax returns filed jointly for the last 3 decades, Mrs. Mitchell's occupation has been listed as homemaker. She has never drawn a salary. She has never held an official title. She has never signed a single corporate check." Aaron chuckled softly. It was a cruel sound. "She raised our children," Aaron whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. "I'll give her that. The nannies helped, of course." Sloan nodded at his client. "Precisely. Mr. Mitchell is generous. He is willing to offer substantial alimony and the lake house in Michigan. But Mrs. Mitchell is demanding 50% of the voting shares of the company. She claims she is a co-founder. Your Honor, this is not a marriage dispute anymore. This is an attempted corporate hostile takeover by a woman who wouldn't know a line of C++ code if it bit her." Violette's lawyer, A sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn Bryce placed a hand on Violette's arm. Evelyn was the opposite of Sloane. She was quiet, methodical, and dangerous. She didn't bark. She waited. "Hold steady, Viv," Evelyn whispered. Violette didn't look at Aaron. She was looking at the stack of evidence boxes Sloane's team had brought in. They were labeled Mitchell Dynamics, historical records. They were trying to bury her in paper. "Mrs. Mitchell," Judge Halloway addressed her directly, bypassing her lawyer for a moment. "You are claiming equitable distribution based on active participation in the business. Your husband's counsel has provided 17 affidavits from board members stating they have never seen you at a meeting. How do you respond to the assertion that you never worked?" Violette slowly lifted her head. Her eyes, usually a soft hazel, were hard as flint. "I didn't go to the meetings, Your Honor," Violette said, her voice raspy but clear, "because someone had to stay home and do the work so Aaron could go to the meetings and take the credit." "Objection!" Sloane barked. "Hearsay and emotional posturing." "Sustained," Halloway sighed. "Miss Bryce, call your first witness." Evelyn Bryce stood up. She didn't call a witness. Instead, she picked up a remote control. "Your Honor, we don't need witnesses to prove Mrs. Mitchell worked. The work speaks for itself. We would like to present Exhibit A, the original architectural source code for the Apex logistics system, dated September 14th, 1998. Aaron rolled his eyes. "That old thing? That's legacy code. I wrote that in my basement." "Did you?" Evelyn smiled. It was a shark's smile. "Then you won't mind if we open the file properties on the main screen?" Aaron shifted in his seat. For the first time, the smirk faltered. To understand the panic that flared briefly in Aaron Mitchell's chest, one must understand the year 1994. Violette Moore was 20 years old, a scholarship student at MIT, with a mind that saw patterns where others saw chaos. She didn't just code, she composed. To her, algorithms were music. She met Aaron at a coffee shop near campus. He was charming, handsome, and full of big ideas, but he lacked the technical architecture to build them. He was a salesman, looking for a product. They fell in love fast, or rather, Violette fell in love, and Aaron fell in opportunity. When they married, Aaron convinced her to drop out. "I'll be the face, Viv," he had told her, holding her face in his hands in their cramped apartment on 42nd Street. "The world is sexist. They won't give funding to a woman in tech right now. It's ugly, but it's true. Let me pitch it. You build it. We're a team. 50-50. Always." She believed him. She was young, and she trusted the man who brought her peonies every Friday. For the next 10 years, the dynamic was set. Aaron would come home at 6 p.m. with a problem. "The clients in Tokyo need the latency reduced by half," he'd say, pouring himself a scotch. Then he would go to bed. Violette would drink a pot of coffee and sit at the clunky desktop computer in the study. She would work until 4 a.m., rewriting kernels, optimizing data flows, and structuring the digital backbone of what would become the world's most efficient shipping software. By morning, she would leave a floppy disk, later a CD, then a USB drive, on the kitchen counter next to his breakfast. Aaron would take it, kiss her on the forehead and say, "You're a lifesaver, babe." Then he would drive to the office, present the solution to his team of engineers, and accept the applause. The erasure was slow. At first, he mentioned her name in interviews. "My wife is my muse." Then it became, "My wife supports me." Eventually, it was just, "I built this." The breaking point didn't come with the affairs. Violette knew about Tiffany, the PR director, and the others before her. She stayed for their son, Leo, and because she had trapped herself. Her name wasn't on the patents. Her name wasn't on the incorporation papers. Aaron had told her it was for liability reasons. The breaking point came 3 months ago at the company's 30th anniversary gala. Violette had stood by Aaron's side, wearing a dress she didn't like, smiling until her cheeks hurt. A young reporter from Forbes, a sharp woman named Jessica Tan, had approached them. "Mr. Mitchell," Jessica asked, "the Apex system is legendary. The complexity of the routing algorithms was light years ahead of its time. How did you come up with the fractal node solution in '98? It's practically mathematical poetry." Aaron laughed, swirling his champagne. "Well, Jessica, inspiration strikes in mysterious ways. I remember locking myself in the cabin for a weekend, just me and the whiteboard. I just saw it. It was pure intuition." Violette froze. The fractal node solution. She remembered that weekend. She hadn't been at a cabin. She had been in the hospital, recovering from a miscarriage. She had brought her laptop to the hospital bed because Aaron called her screaming that the system was crashing. She wrote that code through tears and morphine, bleeding and grieving, to save his company. And he just claimed he did it at a cabin? Aaron looked down at Violette, expecting her adoring gaze. Instead, he saw something dark. He saw the end. That night, she moved out. 2 days later, Aaron filed for divorce, cutting off her credit cards and freezing the joint accounts. He thought he could starve her out. He thought she was helpless without his wallet. Back in courtroom 4B, the projector screen hummed to life. "Mr. Sloan," Judge Holloway said, leaning forward, "your client claims sole authorship of this software." "Absolutely," Sloan said, standing tall. "Mr. Mitchell is the sole inventor, listed on the patent." Evelyn Bryce typed a command into the terminal connected to the projector. The screen filled with lines of code, complex, dense, and archaic C++ language. "This is the source code for the Apex 1.0 kernel," Evelyn explained. "It is the foundation of the entire company. If this code is removed, Mitchell Dynamics ceases to function." "So?" Aaron challenged from his seat. "I wrote it." "Then you know about the ghost signature?" Evelyn asked innocently. Aaron frowned. "The what?" "In architecture," Evelyn said, addressing the judge, "builders sometimes leave a mark in the foundation where no one can see it. A coin, a newspaper, a signature in the cement. Violette Mitchell is an architect of code, and she knew, even back in 1996, that memories fade. But data doesn't." Evelyn hit enter. On the screen, the code shifted. She ran a simple script that isolated the comments, the non-executable text programmers use to leave notes for themselves. Usually, these are things like, "Fix this later," or "This function sorts the list." But Evelyn ran a query for a specific hex code pattern. Suddenly, the screen lit up with red text. Hidden inside the spacing of the code, invisible unless you formatted the text specifically to a 32-column width, a pattern emerged. It wasn't just text, it was ASCII art. It was a picture of a pacifier, and below it the text read, "Coded by Violette Moore, while Aaron sleeps, for the baby we lost. September 1998. The courtroom went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Aaron's face drained of all color. He stood up, knocking his chair over. That's faked! She hacked the server." "This file," Evelyn said, her voice rising with righteous volume, "was pulled directly from the copyright submission you filed with the Library of Congress in 1999. Aaron. It has been in a sealed government vault for 25 years. We subpoenaed it this morning. Unless Violette broke into the Library of Congress 20 years ago. This is your file." Evelyn turned to the judge. "She didn't just write the code, Your Honor. She poured her grief into it. She signed it with her trauma. And today, she is here to collect her royalty. Judge Halloway looked from the screen to Aaron, his expression shifting from boredom to disgust. "Mr. Sloane," the judge said, his voice dropping an octave, "I suggest you sit your client down before I hold him in contempt. We are just getting started." The gavel banged, signaling a 1-hour recess. The sound was like a gunshot that broke the trance in the courtroom. Reporters immediately scrambled for the doors, their phones already pressed to their ears, shouting headlines about "The Ghost in the Machine" and "The Billion-Dollar Housewife." Aaron Mitchell didn't move for a full minute. He stared at the blank screen where the ASCII art of the pacifier had been. His face was a mask of fury struggling against humiliation. "Fix this," Aaron hissed at Garrick Sloane. "I pay you $5,000 an hour. Fix this." Sloane gathered his papers, looking uncharacteristically rattled. "We need to pivot. We can't argue she didn't write it anymore. We have to argue that she gifted it to the marital estate, and that the statute of limitations on intellectual property claims has passed. It's a technicality, but it's our best shot." Aaron stood up, buttoning his jacket. He needed air. He needed a drink. But mostly, he needed to make Violette hurt. He found her in the wide marble corridor outside courtroom 4B. She was standing by a vending machine, buying a bottle of water. It was such a mundane action for a woman who had just set $1 billion valuation on fire. Evelyn Bryce was on her phone a few feet away, giving them a moment of privacy, though her eyes never left Aaron. Aaron approached Violette. He loomed over her, using his height to intimidate, a tactic that had worked for 30 years. "You think you're clever," Aaron said, his voice low and dangerous. Violette unscrewed the cap of her water, taking a slow sip. She didn't flinch. "I don't think I'm clever, Aaron. I know I'm the architect. There's a difference." "That code is ancient history," Aaron spat. "We rewrote the kernel 10 years ago. You proved nothing except that you used to be useful. Do you really want to drag this out? The press will tear you apart. They'll find out about your depression. They'll find out about the time you spent in the clinic." Violette finally looked at him. Her gaze was pitying. "You put me in that clinic, Aaron. You and your neglect. And as for the code being ancient, you and I both know the Apex system is a Jenga tower. You can change the blocks on top, but you never touched the bottom because you didn't understand how it worked. You were too afraid to break it." Aaron's jaw tightened. She was right. He had fired 3 CTOs who suggested rewriting the core code because he couldn't explain how the original algorithms functioned. "I'll offer you a settlement," Aaron said abruptly. $20 million, cash, and you keep the Hamptons house. But you sign an NDA. You admit you were a consultant, nothing more. And you disappear." Violette laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. $20 million? For a company worth $12 billion? You really have lost your touch with numbers. "It's more than you deserve." Aaron's voice rose, causing a passing paralegal to stare. "You sat at home. I dealt with the investors. I dealt with the lawsuits. I built the brand." "You built the myth," Violette corrected. "And myths are fragile." She took a step closer to him, lowering her voice. "And Aaron? It's not just the code. Did you really think I didn't read the contracts you brought home? The dummy files you asked me to proofread in 2010? The offshore incorporation papers for Blue Heron Holdings in the Cayman Islands?" Aaron went rigid. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Blue Heron Holdings," Violette repeated, "where you've been siphoning off 5% of the company profits to hide them from the IRS. And from me. You made a mistake, Aaron. You asked me to digitize those files because you were too cheap to hire a secretary you couldn't sleep with. You forgot that I have a photographic memory for numbers, And I signed those too. Aaron felt the blood drain from his face. You signed the Cayman papers? Digitally, she whispered, in the metadata of the PDFs. Every unauthorized transfer, every hidden ledger, I tagged them all. If we go back into that courtroom, Evelyn isn't just going to show the judge code. She's going to show him tax fraud. Aaron looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time in decades. He didn't see the quiet wife who made sure his shirts were starched. He saw a predator who had been waiting in the tall grass. "What do you want?" Aaron choked out. "I want half," Violette said simply. "And I want my name on the building." "Never," Aaron snarled. "I'll burn it to the ground before I let you take it." Violette shrugged. "Then get your lighter ready, Aaron, because we're just getting started." When the court reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted. The air was thick with tension. Aaron looked sweaty. He kept checking his phone, tapping out furious messages under the table. Judge Holloway looked impatient. "Mr. Sloan, do you have a rebuttal to the evidence presented regarding the source code?" Sloan stood up. He looked tired. "Your Honor, while Mrs. Mitchell may have contributed some rudimentary coding in the late 90s, the company has evolved significantly. To claim ownership based on 30-year-old work is absurd. It's like a bricklayer claiming they own the skyscraper because they laid the foundation. A foundation without which the skyscraper falls," Evelyn Bryce interjected from her seat. "The witness is barely computer literate by today's standards," Sloan argued, grasping for straws. "She hasn't worked in tech for decades. She couldn't possibly understand the current complexities of Mitchell dynamics." Suddenly, a loud buzzing sound echoed through the silent courtroom. It was Aaron's phone. Then, a second later, Sloan's phone buzzed. Then the phone of Aaron's junior associate. Judge Holloway glared. "I explicitly ordered phones on silent." "I'm sorry, Your Honor," Aaron stammered, looking at his screen. His eyes went wide. It's an emergency alert from the server room." "Is the building on fire?" Holloway asked dryly. "No," Aaron said, his voice trembling. "The system, it's going dark." Evelyn Bryce stood up slowly. She looked calm, too calm. "Your Honor," Evelyn said, "if I may, I believe this is relevant to the case." "How is a server crash relevant to a divorce?" Holloway asked. "Because," Evelyn said, walking to the center of the room, "Mr. Sloan just argued that Violette is irrelevant to the current company. He argued that the old code doesn't matter. But at 12 p.m. today, exactly 3 minutes ago, Mitchell Dynamics attempted its scheduled quarterly system update, the Titan update." Aaron looked up at Evelyn, horror dawning on him. "How do you know about the Titan update?" Evelyn ignored him. "This update requires a root access authorization key, a master password that verifies the integrity of the core architecture. Without this key, the system perceives the update as a virus, and when the system perceives a virus, it initiates a defensive protocol." Evelyn turned to Violette. "Mrs. Mitchell, what is that protocol called?" Violette remained seated, her hands folded. "It's called the Iron Curtain, Your Honor. It locks down all shipping data. It freezes the logistics of 40% of the global supply chain. Trucks stop, ships stop, warehouses lock their digital doors." "And why is this happening now?" the judge asked, looking alarmed. "Because Aaron doesn't have the key," Violette said softly. "He never did. The system asks for the architect's biometric. For 30 years, every time there was a major update, Aaron would come home and complain about a bug or a glitch that needed my eyes. I would log in, fix it, and authorize the update. He thought I was just debugging. I was actually authenticating his empire." Aaron jumped to his feet. "You sabotaged us. You locked us out." "I didn't do anything," Violette said. "I'm just sitting here, unemployed. You're the CEO, Aaron. You fix it." Aaron's phone rang again. He answered it on speaker without thinking. "Mr. Mitchell," a frantic voice screamed from the speaker. It was Bennett, the current CTO. "The dashboard is red. Everything is red. Maersk is on the line. They say they can't dock their ships in Rotterdam because our software isn't releasing the manifests. We're losing $3 million a minute in liability clauses. What is the admin code? I tried your password. I tried the backup. Nothing works. Try admin warutodotuenai3, Aaron yelled, panic stripping away his dignity. "I tried that. It's asking for a retina scan, sir. It says user unauthorized. Contact administrator. VM." The courtroom was dead silent, save for the frantic voice of the CTO. "Who is VM?" Bennett screamed. "Aaron, who is VM?" Aaron looked at Violette. The judge looked at Violette. The reporters were typing so fast their fingers were a blur. Violette stood up slowly. She smoothed her skirt. "Your Honor," Violette said, "it seems the company is currently in a state of catastrophic failure because the non-working spouse is not there to hold the door open. I can fix it. I can unlock the Iron Curtain Protocol." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "But I don't work for free. Not anymore." Aaron looked at the judge, desperate. "Order her to fix it. This is blackmail." Judge Halloway leaned back in his chair. He took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. "Mr. Mitchell," the judge said, "you spent the last 3 hours convincing me that this woman has no role in your company, that she is a stranger to its operations. I cannot order a stranger to fix your corporate negligence. That would be slavery." "But the ships," Aaron cried. "The supply chain." "I suggest," the judge said, checking his watch, "that you hire her. And if I were you, I would accept whatever consulting fee she demands. Court is adjourned until 2 p.m. The gavel banged. Aaron stood trembling, the phone still screaming in his hand. He looked at Violette. She didn't look triumphantly. She looked like a businesswoman waiting for a signature. 5 minutes, Aaron," Violette said, checking her non-existent watch. "Every minute is $3 million. Do you want to negotiate, or do you want to be the man who broke global shipping?" Oren slumped. He looked defeated, small and old. "What do you want?" he whispered for the second time that day. Violette pulled a folded document from her blazer pocket. Evelyn had prepared it that morning. "Immediate reinstatement as co-CEO," Violette said. "50% equity transfer, effective immediately, and a public statement admitted to the press that the source code belongs to me. Sign it, and I'll unlock the system." Aaron looked at the paper. Then he looked at his phone, where a text from a major shareholder had just popped up. "Fix this, or you're fired." Aaron grabbed the pen from the table. His hand shook as he signed. Violette took the paper, handed it to Evelyn, and then pulled a laptop out of her tote bag. She opened it, typed for 10 seconds, and hit enter. "Tell Bennett to refresh the screen," Violette said. Aaron lifted the phone. "Refresh it." A pause. Then Bennett's voice came through, sobbing with relief. "It's green. We're back online. The ships are docking. My God, Aaron, don't ever do that again." Violette snapped her laptop shut. She looked at Aaron, who was slumped in his chair, defeated. "I didn't just sign the files, Aaron," she said, her voice echoing in the quiet room. "I am the file." Monday morning at Mitchell Dynamics headquarters felt less like a business day and more like a funeral for the old regime. The skyscraper, a gleaming needle of glass and steel in downtown Chicago, was buzzing with gossip. The story of the Iron Curtain Protocol had leaked, Aaron claimed it was a glitch, but the engineers knew better. They whispered in the break rooms about the ghost architect. Violette arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. She wore a new suit, cream-colored, sharp and expensive. Bought with the retainer from the settlement, Aaron was forced to liquidate assets to pay. She didn't walk with her head down anymore. She walked with the rhythm of someone who owned the floorboards. But Aaron wasn't going to make it easy. When she swiped her keycard at the executive elevator, it flashed red. Access denied. The security guard, a man named Miller who had known her for 20 years as Aaron's wife, looked down at his shoes, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell said your clearance is still pending HR review." It was a petty power move. Aaron wanted her standing in the lobby, humiliated, waiting for a visitor pass. Violette didn't argue. She didn't call Oren. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number for the building's landlord, a real estate mogul whose divorce she had quietly advised Evelyn Bryce on 2 years prior. 3 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, not just for her, but only for her. The landlord had overridden the building's main security grid. When Violette stepped off onto the 40th floor, the silence was deafening. The open plan office, filled with young male coders and junior executives, went still. They stared. To them, she wasn't a pioneer. She was an interloper, a mum who had bored her way into a boardroom. Aaron was waiting in the conference room with the board of directors. He had started the meeting without her. "Ah, Violette," Aaron said, barely looking up from his papers. "You're late. We were just discussing the Q4 projections. Since you're new to the operational side, maybe you should just observe today. Take notes." The board members, 7 men in grey suits, avoided eye contact. They were Aaron's cronies. They had laughed at his jokes about her for years. Violette didn't sit in the empty chair in the corner. She walked to the head of the table, right next to Aaron. "I don't need to take notes on the Q4 projections, Aaron," she said, her voice calm but projecting to the back of the room, "because I read the report you sent out last night. It's wrong." Aaron scoffed. "Excuse me? That report was compiled by our top analysts." "Then fire them," Violette said, tossing a folder onto the table. "You're projecting a 15% growth in the Asian sector based on the Shanghai expansion. But you forgot that the Apex code has a latency issue with the Great Firewall of China. I didn't patch that in 1998 because the firewall didn't exist then. If you launch the expansion next month as planned, the system will lag by 400 milliseconds. You won't gain 15%. You'll lose 30% of your user base to local competitors." The room went silent. One of the board members, a skepticism-heavy man named George Sterling, frowned. "Is that true? The latency issue?" I wasn't aware," Aaron stammered. "We can fix it." "You can't," Violette cut in. "Not without rewriting the core data packets, which I did last night. The patch is already on the server. You're welcome." She sat down, smoothing her skirt. "Now, let's talk about why the marketing budget for the Titan launch is double what it needs to be. Are we selling software, Aaron, or are we funding your vanity parties?" For the next 2 hours, Violette didn't just participate. She dissected the company. She knew every weakness, every inflated cost, every lazy decision Aaron had made in the last decade. She wasn't guessing. She had been reading the reports he left on his nightstand for years. She had been listening to his phone calls through the thin walls of their home. By the time the meeting ended, the board members weren't looking at Aaron. They were looking at Violette. George Sterling even nodded at her on his way out. Aaron remained seated as the room cleared. He looked furious. "You think you've won?" Aaron hissed. "You think because you know the code, you can run the company? These people are loyal to me. The staff, the clients, They see you as a bitter ex-wife." "Competence is a language everyone speaks, Oren," she replied, packing her bag. "Be careful, Viv," Aaron said, a cruel smile returning to his face. "The higher you climb, the harder the fall. And you have a glaring weakness you haven't accounted for." "And what is that?" "You still have a heart," Aaron said. "It's going to be your ruin." The weakness, of course, was Leo. Leo Mitchell was 26 years old. He was handsome, charming, and weak, a dangerous combination. He had his father's smile, but his mother's eyes. He worked at the company as the VP of Special Projects, a title that meant he collected a 6-figure salary to attend lunches and sign papers he didn't read. Violette loved him with a fierceness that terrified her. During the divorce, she had tried to keep him out of it. She didn't want him to choose sides. But Oren had been working on him. Oren had played the victim perfectly to his son. "Your mother is having a breakdown," he had told Leo. "She's vindictive. She wants to destroy my legacy and your inheritance." 3 weeks after Violette rejoined the company, Leo knocked on her office door. "Hey, Mum," he said, poking his head in. He looked tired. Violette's face lit up. It was the first time he had visited her since the court case. "Leo, come in, honey. I was just ordering lunch. Do you want the Cobb salad from that place you like?" Leo sat down, fidgeting with his cuffs. "No, I'm good. Look, Mom, I wanted to say I'm sorry about how I acted. Dad, he gets in my head sometimes." Violette softened. She came around the desk and hugged him. "It's okay. I know how he is better than anyone. I'm just glad you're here." Leo pulled away, looking guilty. "I'm actually here for work, too. I'm trying to step up. Prove I'm not just a Nepo baby, you know? I'm proud of you, Leo. I'm working on this integration for the South American logistics hub," Leo lied smoothly. The lie had been rehearsed with Aaron for hours the night before. "But the legacy clearance won't let me access the historical shipping data. Dad said only you have the override codes for the 99 archives." Violette hesitated. The 99 archives contained the rawest, most vulnerable parts of the source code. It was the skeleton of the entire beast. "That's sensitive data, Leo," she warned. "If that gets corrupted, we lose the transaction history for the first 5 years." "I know, Mum," Leo said, widening his eyes. "I just need to read it. I want to learn how you built it. Dad never taught me. I want to learn from you." That was the dagger. "I want to learn from you." Violette looked at her son. She saw the boy she had nursed through fevers. She saw the teenager she had helped with math homework while Aaron was working late. She wanted so badly to be respected by him. "Okay," she sighed. She wrote a string of characters on a sticky note. "This is a one-time use key. It gives you read-only access for 24 hours. Be careful." Leo took the note. His hand trembled slightly. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." He kissed her on the cheek and left. Violette watched him go, feeling a warm glow of maternal pride. She didn't see him walk straight to the elevator, go down to the 40th floor, and hand the sticky note to Aaron. "You got it?" Aaron asked, snatching the paper. "She trusts me," Leo said, his voice hollow. "Dad, are you sure this is just to audit her work? You're not going to hurt the company, right?" "Of course not, Leo," Aaron lied, typing the code into his terminal. "We're just going to prove that she's reckless with security. We need to show the board she's a liability. It's for the good of the family. Do you want to be CEO one day, or do you want your mother to sell it all to a hedge fund?" Leo looked down. "I want to be CEO." "Then watch and learn." Aaron didn't use the code to read the files. He used the access Violette had granted, authenticated by her personal admin signature, to upload a file. It wasn't a virus. It was worse. It was a logic bomb. A script designed to slowly delete customer data, randomized and untraceable, making it look like the system was degrading due to incompetence. And because Violette's code was used to open the door, the system logs would scream one name: user, VM, action, delete. The next morning, the alarms didn't ring. It was silent. Violette walked into the office, coffee in hand, ready for another day of restructuring. She was stopped by 2 armed security guards at her door. Mrs. Mitchell, Garrick Sloane, the lawyer, stepped out from her office. He was holding a stack of printouts. "You need to step away from the computer." "Excuse me?" Violette asked, confused. "What is going on?" Aaron walked out behind him, looking grave. He put a hand on Leo's shoulder. Leo wouldn't look at his mother. "We have evidence of corporate sabotage," Aaron announced loudly, so the whole floor could hear. "Last night, at 7:00 p.m., a script was executed that deleted the billing records for our top 10 clients. The command came from your terminal, using your override key." "That's impossible," Violette said, her heart hammering. "I was at home." "But you gave the key to someone, didn't you?" Aaron asked, smirking. "Or maybe you just got careless? Or vindictive?" Aaron turned to the board members who had gathered. "She's unstable, I told you. She's trying to sink the ship because she's angry about the divorce." Violette looked at Leo. "Leo, tell them. Tell them I gave you the key for the archives." Leo looked up. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. The promise of the CEO chair was too bright to ignore. I don't know what you're talking about, Mum," Leo said. "I wasn't in your office yesterday." The betrayal hit Violette harder than any physical blow. The room spun. Her son, her beautiful boy. He was erasing her, just like his father did. "Security," Aaron barked. "Escort Mrs. Mitchell out of the building. We will be filing for an emergency injunction to strip her of her shares for cause." Violette didn't scream. She didn't fight the guards. She stared at Leo until he turned away in shame. As they marched her to the elevator, Aaron leaned in close to her ear. "I told you, Viv," he whispered. "You checked the code, but you forgot to check the people." The elevator doors closed, leaving Violette alone in the metal box, stripped of her company, her reputation, and her son. But as the numbers ticked down, 39, 38, 37, Violette's shock began to fade, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. They thought she was out. They thought the game was over because they had taken her key. But they forgot one thing. Violette didn't just write the software. She wrote the surveillance system that monitored the software. And she had a recording of every keystroke made in that building, including the ones made in Aaron's office after Leo handed him the note. She reached into her purse and touched the small encrypted hard drive she carried everywhere. "Okay, Leo," she whispered to the empty elevator. "You want to play the villain? Then let me show you what happens when the hero stops being nice." 72 hours. That was how long Violette Mitchell had been banned from the building she helped design. For 3 days, the media had speculated on her silence, portraying her as a scorned woman who had lashed out in a fit of digital rage. Aaron had spun the narrative perfectly, painting himself as the benevolent leader forced to amputate a gangrenous limb for the sake of the company. But silence, as Aaron would soon learn, was not the same as surrender. Silence was simply the sound of a weapon loading. On Thursday afternoon, Violette walked through the revolving glass doors of the Mitchell Dynamics lobby. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The usual hum of conversation died out, replaced by the sharp, rhythmic clack of her heels on the marble floor. She wasn't alone. Flanking her left was Evelyn Bryce, looking less like a lawyer and more like an executioner holding a briefcase. On her right were two men in dark suits with earpieces, federal agents from the Cyber Crimes Division. But the man walking a step behind her drew the most terrified whispers from those who recognized him. He was Dr. Aris Kincaid. In the dark underbelly of Silicon Valley, Kincaid was a myth, a forensic data ghost hunter who didn't just find the smoking gun. He found the bullet, the casing, and the fingerprint of the man who loaded it. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah who had been hired only a month ago, went pale. She fumbled for the phone, her fingers trembling as she reached for the direct line to the CEO's office. I have to call Mr. Mitchell, Sarah stammered. Evelyn Bryce stepped forward, gently placing her hand over the receiver. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a court order. No calls, Sarah. This is a federal raid. If you touch that phone, you become an accessory to obstruction of justice. Sarah snatched her hand back as if the phone were red hot. Violette didn't stop. She walked past the security desk, where Miller, the head guard, stood. He looked at the agents, then at Violette. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod and swiped his master keycard, overriding the lockdown Aaron had placed on her ID. 40th floor, Mrs. Mitchell, Miller said quietly. Thank you, Miller, Violette replied, stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed, she checked her reflection in the polished steel. She didn't look tired. She didn't look sad. She looked like iron. 40 floors up, the mood in the boardroom was jubilant. The air smelled of expensive cologne and even more expensive champagne. Aaron Mitchell stood at the head of the long mahogany table, a crystal flute raised high. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the faces of the 7 board members who had sided with him. To the future, Aaron announced, his smile tight but triumphant. We weathered the storm, gentlemen. The glitch has been purged. The stock is already rebounding. Hear, hear, George Sterling mumbled, raising his glass. At the far end of the table sat Leo. He wasn't drinking. He was staring into a glass of water, his face pale and clammy. He looked like a man who had survived a car crash, only to realize he was still bleeding internally. The guilt was eating him alive, but the fear of his father and the fear of losing his inheritance kept him silent. And to trimming the fat, Aaron added, his eyes landing on Leo with a warning glint. Sometimes you have to cut off the past to save the future. The double doors at the entrance of the boardroom didn't just open. They slammed against the walls with a violence that made the crystal glasses rattle on the table. Aaron froze, his champagne halfway to his mouth. The room went dead silent. Violette stood in the doorway, framed by the agents and her legal team. She took a moment to survey the room, the half-empty bottle of Dom Perignon, the celebratory smiles fading into confusion, the terrified look in her son's eyes. What is this? Aaron demanded, putting his glass down so hard the stem snapped. Security! How did she get in here? Sit down, Aaron, Violette said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. It wasn't a request. It was a command. You have no power here, Aaron yelled, his face flushing a deep, angry red. He pointed a shaking finger at her. You are a saboteur. You deleted our client data. You are trespassing on private property. Violette ignored him. She walked to the head of the table, forcing Aaron to step back or be trampled. She placed a small, silver-hard drive on the mahogany surface. The metallic clink echoed like a gunshot. Dr. Kincaid. Violette nodded to the specialist. Dr. Kincaid stepped forward, plugging the drive into the room's main media console without asking for permission. The projector screen descended from the ceiling, casting a cold blue light over the board members. Gentlemen, Kincaid began, his voice gravelly and devoid of emotion. My name is Eris Kincaid. Mrs. Mitchell retained me to perform a forensic audit of the logic bomb incident that occurred 72 hours ago. We already know who did it, Garrick Sloane, Aaron's lawyer, interjected, standing up. The command came from her user profile. We have the logs. This is a waste of time. Yes, Kincaid agreed, typing a command into his laptop. The profile was hers. But in cybersecurity, logs only tell you which key opened the door. They don't tell you who was holding it. However, keystroke dynamics does. Kincaid hit a key. A complex graph appeared on the screen, showing two distinct wave patterns. This is a biometric fingerprint, Kincaid explained, pointing to the top graph, which flowed in smooth, rhythmic waves. Every human being types differently. It's unconscious. The flight time between keys, the dwell time on the space bar, the pressure applied to the Enter key. This top graph represents Violette Mitchell. She types at an average of 90 words per minute, with a fluid, legato cadence. She barely touches the keys. He pointed to the bottom graph. It was jagged, erratic, and spiked with sharp peaks. The person who executed the delete command didn't type like Mrs. Mitchell. This person is a hunt and peck typist. They hesitate for 0.4 seconds before hitting the Enter key. They strike the Delete key with 3 times the necessary force, indicating aggression or panic. And most damning of all, Kincaid zoomed in on a section of the graph. This typist has a consistent, rhythmic tremor in their left hand. Every time their left hand hovers over the Shift or Control keys, there is a micro-stutter in the input signal. The room went so quiet, you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Slowly, every eye in the room turned to Aaron Mitchell. Aaron's left hand was resting on the table. It was shaking. It was a tremor he had developed 5 years ago, a side effect of his high blood pressure medication. A fact every board member knew, because he often complained about it during stressful quarters. Aaron snatched his hand off the table, hiding it behind his back. That's circumstantial. That's voodoo science. You can't prove that was me based on how hard I hit a button. You're right, Violette said, stepping into the light of the projector. The typing is just the fingerprint, but we needed a confession. I never confessed to anything, Aaron screamed, sweat beading on his forehead. Not to the police, Violette said softly, but you confessed to your co-conspirator. She tapped the spacebar on the laptop. You thought the surveillance system in your office was on a closed loop, Aaron. You thought I only had access to the shipping code. But you forgot who wired this building in 1999. I installed the microphones, and I never gave you the admin key to turn them off. Audio filled the room. It wasn't grainy or muffled. It was crystal clear, broadcast in high definition, surround sound. Dad, are you sure this is just to audit her work? You're not going to hurt the company, right? The voice was unmistakably Leo's. He sounded young, scared, and desperate for approval. Leo closed his eyes, tears leaking out, unable to look at the board members. Then Aaron's voice boomed through the speakers, dripping with arrogance. Of course not, Leo. We're just going to prove that she's reckless. We need to show the board she's a liability. Do you want to be CEO one day, or do you want your mother to sell it all to a hedge fund? I want to be CEO. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. George Sterling looked at Aaron with an expression of pure revulsion. This wasn't just a messy divorce anymore. This was federal crime. This was conspiracy, fraud, and the deliberate destruction of corporate assets to frame a shareholder. Corporate sabotage, Evelyn Bryce announced, reading from a legal pad as she ticked off the charges. Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, and perjury in a sworn affidavit. The 2 federal agents stepped forward. They didn't run. They walked with the slow, inevitable pace of justice. One of them pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "Aaron Mitchell," the agent said, his voice cutting through the tension. "You are under arrest." Aaron scrambled back, knocking his chair over. He looked wild, cornered. "No, you can't do this. I am the CEO. I built this tower. You work for me." The agent grabbed Aaron's wrist, twisting it behind his back. Aaron yelped in pain. "Leo!" Aaron screamed, looking frantically at his son. "Leo, tell them! Tell them it's a lie! Tell them she doctored the tape!" Leo sat frozen. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just wept, his head in his hands, shrinking away from the man he had idolized for 26 years. As they dragged Oren out of the room, his dignity disintegrated. He wasn't a titan of industry anymore. He was just a desperate, angry old man screaming curses at his ex-wife. He called her a witch, a ghost, a snake. Violette watched him go with the same dispassionate expression one might use when watching a bag of trash being taken to the curb. When the elevator doors finally chimed and closed, taking Aaron's shouting with them, the boardroom felt strangely large. Violette turned her gaze to the end of the table, to Leo. "Mom!" Leo choked out. He stood up on shaky legs, wiping his face with his sleeve. He looked at her, his eyes pleading. "Mom, I'm so sorry. He manipulated me. You heard the tape. He told me you were going to sell the company. I was scared. I didn't know he was going to delete the files." Violette walked slowly down the length of the table. She stopped in front of him. She looked at his face and saw the echoes of the toddler she had nursed through fevers, the boy she had helped with math homework while Aaron was working late. Leo stepped forward, reaching for her, expecting the embrace. He expected the mother who always forgave, the mother who fixed his scraped knees and hid his mistakes from his father. "I love you, Leo," Violette said softly. "I love you too, Mom," Leo sobbed, relief washing over his face. "I'll make it up to you. We can fix this. We can run the company together. Just like you wanted." Violette pulled back. Her eyes were dry. "No," she said. The word hung in the air, sharp and cold. Leo froze. "What?" "You chose your side, Leo," Violette said, her voice hardening into steel. "You didn't just lie to me. You sat in this room yesterday, watched me get thrown out by security, and said nothing. You chose the lie because it was easier. You chose the title because you were greedy." She turned to the board, addressing them for the first time. "I am making a motion to terminate Leo Mitchell from his position as VP of Special Projects, effective immediately," Violette announced, "and to revoke his access to the family trust fund due to violating the moral turpitude clause of the bylaws." George Sterling didn't hesitate. Seconded. "Mom, please," Leo begged, grabbing the edge of the table. "You can't do this. I'm your son. You can't fire your own son." "I am your mother," Violette said, looking him dead in the eye. "And the best thing a mother can do is teach her child that actions have consequences. You want to be a man, Leo? You want to be a CEO? Go out there and start from zero. Build something real." "Like I did," she nodded to Miller. "Escort him out." Leo stood there, stunned, as the security guard gently took his arm. "Let's go, son," Miller said, kindly but firmly. Leo looked back one last time, but Violette had already turned away. She couldn't watch him leave. If she watched, she might break, and today she needed to be unbreakable. When the door closed, leaving her alone with the silent board members, Violette exhaled a breath she felt she had been holding for 30 years. She walked to the head of the table, Aaron's seat. She didn't sit in it. Instead, she pushed the chair aside and stood by the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The sun was setting, painting the city in gold and fire. The glass reflected her image. She had lost a husband. She had lost the illusion of her son. She was alone at the top. But as she looked at her reflection, she didn't see a victim. She didn't see a housewife. She saw the architect. She pulled out her phone and dialed the engineering department. "This is Violette Mitchell," she said, her voice echoing with authority. "Reboot the system. We have work to do." Aaron thought he could erase Violette because she didn't wear a suit or sit at the head of the table. He mistook silence for submission and invisible labor for no labor at all. But in a digital world, nothing is ever truly erased. There is always a backup, always a log, and always a signature. Violette proved that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting orders. It's the one who knows how the machine works because they built it from scratch. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always comes out in the metadata. What would you have done if you were Violette? Would you have forgiven Leo? Let me know in the comments below.